Chris here at the Southwest Center. Wanted to drop a new video today as we kind of take a deep dive into differentiation using AI tools. We get a lot of questions and a lot of feedback from teachers, whether they're doing their student teaching or still in college, or maybe they're even a veteran teacher, and they just say, why? Differentiation really consumes a lot of my time because I spend all this time trying to use these leveling tools and trying to make sure that the content that I'm teaching is appropriate for the learning level that students are in. And I have this wide variety of abilities in my classroom. So how can I use tools that are available to me, free tools that might save me time and make things relevant and engaging for my students? So we're going to take a look at some things today. We're going to use ChatGPT for some of those tools. We're going to also look at something called Google Notebook LM. And then one final tool just for fun is we'll look at something called Suno AI, all of which I think are really great tools that may or may not work for your classroom. So we want to give you some options based on how comfortable you are using these different tools. So think about how often we do text leveling as an accommodation in our classroom. One of the things you can see on my screen that I'm sharing here is ChatGPT. So I think about how often in my career I had students that we were they had an IEP that required us to level text, or a 504, or maybe I'm a high school teacher and I've got a student in my classroom that's on a third grade reading level, and I just want to be able to allow them to engage in what's going on. And so I'm just using this as a tool to hopefully meet my students where they are. So with that in mind, I'm going to pull up a couple of prompts that I've already created and saved. And this one that we're going to look at to start with is just a reading passage. This reading passage I found on Google. I copied and pasted it into the chat box to get us started, and it's titled Happy Talk by Oscar Hammerstein. So as you can see, it's not a particularly long reading passage, but as soon as I uploaded it, it recognized what it was. It gives me a little bit of information about the reading passage, and I just simply prompted it and asked it to do this. Can you please adapt this passage to a third grade reading level? So it didn't change the length of it at all, but it gave me an adapted version. And the follow-up prompt from AI basically said, here's a simpler version. It's got some shorter sentences, maybe some examples that are more familiar to a third grader, and it's changed some vocabulary, hopefully, to make it a little bit easier to read. So then my next prompt, because that may be perfect, that may be exactly what I needed, or maybe I need another version of it that's a fifth grade reading level or a eighth grade reading level. So I could be really specific in terms of what I want it to produce, and I may have multiple copies that go to different kids in my classroom. Also, though, I may want it to be more concise. I may decide, you know what, this vocabulary is great, it's easier to read, but I've got some students that this is, especially on much longer reading passages, I need it to be more concise and more condensed. So my next prompt was simply something like, can you please make this more concise? And it does, and actually, just comparing the two, this is about half the length of the original one. So now, if I've got a student, especially a struggling reader, who I know is going to be overwhelmed by long reading passages, now they're getting similar content, but they're getting it in a more condensed version. And all these things took 30 seconds or less to be produced for me. Let's take it another step further. We'll talk about differentiation. Maybe you have a student in your class who doesn't speak English, is not their first language, and maybe reading English is really a challenge for them. So here's my next prompt. Please translate this passage into Ukrainian. And so now I have a translated version. I believe ChatGPT is fluent in 50 languages, if my information is correct. So I can take that same text, and this student, and once again, hypothetically, I've got a student who nobody speaks their language in the classroom or in my school district potentially, and now I have a way to give them content that they can read, they can engage in, and they can be an active participant in my class. So those are just some really quick, easy ways in which I could use it as a text leveling tool, or as a way to translate, or as a way to make things more concise. Okay, so let's take this a step further. What if we were going to use AI as a way to make learning more personalized for our kids? Let's say I teach a subject that students are super disengaged in, okay? Math is an easy one to kind of just talk about. Let's say I'm an Algebra 1 teacher, and I have really struggled getting kids to understand concepts and to get them engaged in anything that I'm trying to teach, because in many ways it's confusing to kids and they've already made up their mind that they're not good at math, that they don't like math. So, what if I used AI as a tool to differentiate learning on a personal level, to get kids more engaged, and maybe to explain things in a way that's easier for them to understand? So, let me show you an example of what I'm talking about. So, I have a prompt here that's just Algebra 1 and football, is what I've titled it. And my initial prompt was I wanted AI to first understand what its role was. So in this situation, I just told it was an expert in curriculum instruction in the state of Missouri. I thought that was important that it understood what state we're operating in because I want its answers to be tied to the Missouri learning standards. So then I just copied and pasted one of the Algebra 1 standards, which was understand solving equations as a process and solve equations and inequalities in one variable. And then my next sentence there was, I need your assistance in teaching this standard while making connections to the sport of football. So as you can see, it produced pretty lengthy lesson plan. And it started off with the standard and some learning goals, but it gave me a warm-up activity, which I thought was great, where kids could work in small groups or whatever. But it just says, imagine you're the coach of a football team. You need to score 30 points to win. If each touchdown is worth 6 points and each field goal is worth 3 points, how many touchdowns and field goals do you need to win? And then just letting students kind of play with that, letting them explore answers and discuss some things in small groups, which I think is a fantastic strategy as well. And then it goes into activity 1. I go down here, there's a second activity, there's a third activity, and then some reflection questions that kind of come at the end. And then the thing that I've seen a lot with AI now is there's always some type of extensions that are optional that they almost generally add. And there's things that's missing from here. I could always go back and I could say, hey, this is great, but give me more information or give me more lesson ideas tied to this concept or tied to this activity. Like I could dig deeper into that same prompt if I wanted to. But it's also got like an assessment or an evaluation piece, and then some type of an exit ticket was tied to this as well. But I talk to teachers a lot who tell me that, getting kids engaged in what I'm teaching is a constant struggle. So it's really not that far of a stretch that we could, I don't have a prompt built for this, but we could have this same prompt, understanding solving equations as a process and solving equations in one variable, and each kid in the classroom, in theory, could ask it to basically teach them that standard and then tie it to something they love. It doesn't have to be football. It might be music. It might be their favorite TV show. It might be some other hobby or activity that they love. But in theory, we could differentiate for every kid in the classroom and have them learning the same content, but learning it based on something that they're engaged in and being able to connect that learning to something that's personal for them. So just another thought and a strategy in terms of differentiation that I think is certainly not very time consuming and may be relevant for you in your classroom. All right, so let's take a look at another possibility. This is one of my favorite actually, because I think so often we teach students concepts. We do some type of formative assessment or an exit ticket, and we realize that there was a good chunk of our kids that did not understand the content or they need it retaught in some way, shape, or form. And the joke that I share a lot when I do workshops is our RTI model, more often than not, is we teach the same thing, we just teach it louder and slower. And we know that that's not an effective way to try to reteach for our students. So if our interventions are a struggle for you, sometimes just being creative and thinking outside the box can be a challenge for a lot of us. What if I used AI as a tutoring tool? Think about being able to differentiate to get down to the very specifics of how kids don't understand things if we just ask AI to explain things to me in a different way. So I've got kind of an extreme example, and this probably be more something that a college student might use, but I think it gets my point across. So let's say that you have a class in quantum physics, and you need some help understanding quantum physics in a better way. So here's the prompt that I simply started with. I need assistance learning quantum physics. Please explain it to me in terms that a sixth grader could understand. Now apply that to anything that you teach. Apply that to any student in your classroom and think about the possibilities of what AI might be able to open the door for. So if you notice, the answers that I got, really it starts to define what quantum physics is, but I love how it starts talking about imagining the world made up of Legos, right? So it's making a connection to something that's real, that's a real world example for those students. And it goes into a lot of detail of how the Lego blocks are like atoms and particles. And then it goes into stuff even here, like particles are like magicians. everything shaky and uncertain. Like, it breaks things down into something that's pretty easy to read, but it also uses some really kid-friendly language. There's a reference to jelly beans in a jar. There's a reference to imagine playing hide and go seek. Like, I'm not going to read this to you word for word, but it's not a super lengthy explanation. But I think it absolutely, at least, it's one more tool. It's one more strategy that might help a kid understand a concept and be able to explain it to them in a way that you hadn't thought of. And so I would just challenge you to try that. If you have kids that are having a hard time understanding certain concepts and examples, just simply ask AI to be a tutor for them. And it doesn't have to be something they do. It could be something that you do along with them, or something that you do as a class. And maybe that helps, open the door to some new learning, and to give kids some other ways to make connections to what you're trying to teach. Let's switch gears. Let's explore a different platform other than ChatGPT. And I'm going to show you something called Google Notebook LM. And you can easily get there. You can just simply go into Google and do a Google search for Google Notebook LM. And when you do, it should take you to a page that looks something like this. It is also a free tool, much like ChatGPT. Typically, you have to sign in with an email address, but if you have a Gmail account, it's typically like a one click, and you can just get right in. So when you open it up, you're going to get into something that looks like this. And these are what a new notebook would look like. And what you start with is some type of an upload of a document. It could be a PDF you've got saved on your desktop or in your downloads folder. It might be a link to a website. It might be text that you've just copied and pasted. So any format in which you want to drop it in. But for the purpose of this, we're going to do something with social studies. Let's say we're going to use a Declaration of Independence. So I literally did a Google search for the Declaration of Independence in a PDF. I click on this. I've got a PDF version of the Declaration of Independence here. I'm going to download that to my desktop. And when I go back into Google Notebook and I go to choose my file, there's my declaration. I'm going to upload it. So it takes me to this screen. And once I get here, as you can see, it's working up here in this top left-hand corner. So now it has the declaration as a PDF. And first thing it does is it gives me some type of a little bit of a summary of what this document is. There's buttons here, so this actually looks different. They've changed the format since the last time I was logged in. So there's an audio overview, but you can also have it start creating documents for you. This is a really cool one right here. So I can click on the generate button here. It's going to take a little bit of time, but I'll show you here in a second what it actually generates. Also, it gives me some options. It'll do a study guide, it'll do an FAQ, it'll do a briefing doc, and literally all I do is when I click on these, as you notice, it just starts creating it. It takes a little bit of time for it to process. Some things are going to happen quicker than others. Like an FAQ generally doesn't take a tremendous amount of time to create. What we've got going on up here may take a few minutes. Also, if you notice down here, there's just some opportunities to type. I could start asking questions about the Declaration of Independence. I could ask questions like, there's a prompt already given to me. If you notice, it says, what's the process of drafting and adopting the Declaration, or what was the process? So I could ask it that question. I could type it in, or a question's already kind of been generated for me. I can ask it that question, and then it'll generate an answer, and it'll give me some stuff about the Continental Congress. So it gives me a little bit of history specific to the question that I ask. I also, if you notice, I can add more sources here. So right now, the Declaration is the only thing I have, but if I wanted to add more things to it, I could continue to add new content there. The other really cool thing that it does is it saves these for me. So I'm going to let this continue to work. I'm going to show you something else that I did earlier. So if I click up here on the icon, it will take me to all my notebooks. I have notebooks for different workshops that I have facilitated over the last month or two, but I also have one on the Constitution. So I created this earlier. And if you notice, it did the same thing with the Constitution. It gave me a little bit of a summary of it. I asked it to create an FAQ, and I asked it to create a study guide. And so it's given me both of those things that I can click on and read through those if I want to, or I can minimize those. But here's the thing that I generated before. This is what was still working in the declarations page. It wasn't quite finished yet. So this is an AI-generated podcast. And I'll give you just a quick sample of what that looks like or sounds like.
All right, ready to dive in. Today, we're tackling something pretty massive, the U.S. Constitution.
Oh, yeah. A foundational document, you could say.
Exactly. We're going beyond just reading it, though, which, by the way, we do have a copy right here from the National Constitution Center.
Right, straight from the source.
Yep.
So that's a quick 15 seconds. We're not going to spend a lot of time listening to that, but every one of these I've ever uploaded literally has 2 AI-generated voices, almost always one male and one female. And in this case, it's 12 minutes long, and it's going to be those two having a conversation about the Constitution. Think about our students who sometimes need some type of an auditory tool to be able to help them learn. We know we have all kinds of different learners in our classroom, and a lot of our kids are very auditory. Think about the kids that use headphones and earbuds every day. Like that's the world that a lot of them live in. And so if we can provide them information around something we're teaching in an auditory medium, is that another differentiation tool that might help them be more engaged and help them learn in a different way? So once again, a really cool tool. Something I think we absolutely could do is we could then, if I wanted to add a source, we were saying before, I could go over here, I could add a source to this same notebook, right? So I can go in and I could add the declaration with it. So let's just say that I had the declaration and the Constitution together. So instead of having them in 2 separate notebooks, now I've got them together. And I think all I'm going to do here is I can toggle back and forth between each of those, or I could even probably start typing in here and asking it to compare and contrast. What are some similarities? What are differences? How is one related to the other? So lots of different things we could do with multiple documents in there at the same time. But this tool right here, as far as using the podcast version, is pretty cool. I'm also pretty certain if we went back to our Declaration of Independence page that we had, the podcast has been created now, and it's 24 minutes long, which is really interesting. So even though it's a shorter document, there's a 24-minute podcast that's tied to the Declaration of Independence, which is probably why it took so much longer to generate, because now it's twice as long. All right, one last tool that I really want to show you guys that's so much fun, and we get a lot of feedback from teachers and students that they just love this tool, and it's called Suno AI. And so if I do a Google search for Suno, I'm going to see a result like this, and it's just like before with some of the other applications I've showed you. It's usually like a one-click sign-in if you have a Gmail account. It's free, and once you get signed in, the homepage looks something like this. Now, I have some songs that I've already created that are saved over here on this right-hand side for you. If it's the first time you've logged in, there will be nothing over here on this side, and you're just going to go to the Create button. Normally, you have 50 credits. I've been playing with this a little bit today, and so I've used some of my credits already. So those 50 credits are free every day, and every song that you generate takes about 10 credits away. So really, you get about 5 songs a day. Unless you want to pay for the paid version, then you get more credits than that. If you stick with the free version, then you just wait 24 hours, and it repopulates your credits, and you can do songs again, and it'll save them for you as you go. So I gave it a song title here, or a song description, where I just basically asked Suno to create a country song for an elementary physical education classroom in rural Missouri. And I told it that the community is highly engaged in extracurricular activities like athletics and band. So I've only got 200 characters that I can type in here, so I got to keep that description pretty brief, and I can just hit create. Now, I have no idea what this song's going to sound like or what the lyrics are going to look like, because I didn't give it that detailed of information. And generally it takes about 15 seconds or so, and it'll create those songs for me. It always creates them in pairs, because usually there's 2 different versions of this. Generally they're not completely different, but you can kind of try them both out and see which one you like better. But I'm going to play this a little bit for you. We'll play like the first 15-20 seconds. The other thing you're going to notice while we're playing this is the lyrics to the song will be over here on the right-hand side.
In our little town in old Missouri, we grab our sneakers early, never in a hurry. From the gym to the field, it's where we play, with friends in the sunshine all day.
So one of the reasons that we only had 40 credits is I created a song earlier, gave it the exact same prompt Same thing, elementary classroom, Missouri, but I asked it to do a hip hop song instead of a country song. And so here's the hip hop version with the same prompt.
Early morning, rise and shine. Get your game face on in line. Time to sweat and stretch our gear. Ready, set, go, don't show no fear. Country roads and fields so green. PE class, the champion team. Bouncing balls and hurdling high. Reach the stars, don't be shy. Move your feet, stop the ground. Feel the beat, hear the sound. Jump and run.
So just think about all the opportunities to and the possibilities you have there to get your kids engaged, to be able to create a fun song around an activity that you're doing in class, having kids create their own songs as an engagement tool, and just that differentiation piece. Like, we know that all of our kids are so different, and the way that the creative ways that we can find to engage them it's taxing. It's hard, and I don't know about the most of you, but I know for me, being creative is not something that I consider a strength for me. And so anytime I can use some tools to be able to engage my kids and make things more fun, and to get kids interested in what we're learning, I absolutely want to use and want to know more about those tools. So hopefully this is something that would be relevant to you as well, or something you want to try. The other feature here that I do want to show you really quick is you can, if you're more creative than me, you can create custom songs. And so you just toggle this switch here. And when I create a custom song, let me get out of here and go to create so it creates something new. I can go in. So this is actually saved some lyrics from a previous song, but I can go into custom and I can generate my own lyrics. And so if there's something specific that you really want to make sure is in there, you can put those lyrics in there. You have up to like 3,000 characters you can put in this box. You can tell it the style or the genre. So you could tell it that you wanted it to create a rap song, or that you wanted it to create a classic rock song, or whatever it might be. The other thing that you can do is you can give it a title. And so you can make it a little bit more personal to you and what you have in mind for your classroom. But once again, just a fun tool, something I would encourage you to try out if you're just looking for new ideas for your classroom.